She laughed when her sister married a farmer. 10 years later, that farmer owned their family home. The air in the grand drawing room was thick with the scent of dying roses and quiet desperation. Abena, matriarch by default and demeanor, held a crystal glass of wine, her knuckles white. Her voice, usually a sharp instrument of command, was brittle. The bank was clear. We have until the end of the month. Murmurs rippled through the gathered family, a chorus of well-dressed helplessness. Then, the heavy oak door creaked open. Nana entered, his wife Amara beside him. He did not look like a man worth over $1 billion. He looked like the earth, solid, patient, unmoved. He held a single rolled document in his hand, tied with a simple string. Abena's eyes flickered towards him, a spark of her old, familiar contempt. Nana, we are in the middle of a family crisis. I doubt you have anything to contribute unless you plan to sell your yams. Nana walked to the center of the room. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. The silence that followed him was heavier than any shout. He looked directly at Abena. You always said I was not fit to stand in this house. His voice was calm, a slow river of sound. Today, I own it. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Abena's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, a splash of red against the white. This story is a powerful reminder that the hands that till the soil are the same hands that can hold the future. It is a testament to the fact that true wealth is not what you own, but what you give. And the story of Nana, Abena, and Auntie Yeside is one you will never, ever forget. Subscribe to our channel for more tales that feed the soul. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 10 years earlier, Nana Kwabena was a man defined by the rich, dark soil of Tamale in the northern region of Ghana. He was 44 years old, but his hands looked a century older. They were maps of labor, etched with the stories of planting seasons and harvests, droughts and downpours. The skin on his palms was thick, a permanent callus that felt like soft leather, and his fingernails held a stubborn crescent of the earth he loved. His skin was the color of that earth after a long, satisfying rain, deep, dark, and vital. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall with the broad, powerful shoulders of a man who did not command from a desk, but from the field, lifting and carrying the weight of his own dreams. Nana was not born into poverty, but he was born into humility. His family had farmed the same land for generations, understanding the silent language of the seasons. They knew the exact moment to plant the maize, the precise day the yams were ready to be coaxed from the ground. This knowledge was his inheritance, more precious to him than gold. While his peers in Accra were chasing degrees in law and finance, Nana was studying the sky. He was learning the alchemy of turning a single seed into sustenance for 100 people. He believed, with a faith as deep and unshakable as a baobab root, that the future of his country, of his continent, was not in skyscrapers, but in the soil beneath them. When he met Amara, the world seemed to shift on its axis. She was from a wealthy Accra family, the younger daughter of a successful commodities trader. She was expected to marry a politician, a banker, an oil executive. Instead, she fell in love with the quiet farmer from the north. She saw past the dirt under his nails and saw the kingdom he was building, one floor at a time. She saw the integrity in his posture, the kindness in his eyes that looked at a market woman with the same respect he would give a king. Their love was a quiet, sturdy thing, like a well-tended crop. But Amara had a sister, an older sister, Abena. Abena was everything Nana was not. Where he was earth, she was glass, sharp, polished, and easily shattered. Her beauty was an expensive, high-maintenance construction. Her hair was not the natural, tightly coiled crown Amara wore, but a cascade of Brazilian weave that cost more than Nana's first acre of land. Her skin was lighter, aided by creams and treatments that promised a glow money could buy. She lived in a sprawling mansion in Buckhead, Atlanta, a world away from the dust of Tamale, and only returned to the family compound in Accra for holidays, like a visiting queen holding court. Her uniform was Chanel, Her scent was Tom Ford, and her opinion was law. From the moment Amara introduced Nana, Abena saw him not as a man, but as a stain on the family's reputation. He was a project, a disgrace, a walking, breathing symbol of her sister's poor judgment. She could not comprehend a love that wasn't transactional, a success that wasn't measured in carats and stock portfolios. To her, Nana's hands were not noble. They were simply dirty. His quiet confidence was not strength, it was a lack of sophistication. His dream of feeding a nation was not visionary, it was pathetic. He was, in her carefully curated world, a farmer, and that was the most damning word she could imagine. The family, a sprawling clan of cousins and uncles and aunties, took their cues from Abena. She was the eldest, the wealthiest, the loudest. Her laughter became their laughter. Her scorn became their scorn. They tolerated Nana at family gatherings, but he was always on the periphery, an outsider in his own marriage, a silent observer of a life he did not aspire to, but was judged by nonetheless. To escape the suffocating atmosphere of the family compound during their visits, Nana developed a ritual. Every Saturday morning, he would drive to the sprawling Makola market in the heart of Accra. It was a chaotic symphony of life, a maze of sights, sounds, and smells that grounded him. The shouts of vendors, the haggling of customers, the vibrant mountains of tomatoes, garden eggs, and plantains. It was the end of the journey that began in his fields. It was here, in the heart of the city's stomach, that he felt most at home. And it was here that he met Auntie Yeside. Her stall was not the largest or the most prominent. It was a small, humble oasis in the pepper section of the market. But it was overflowing with life. Baskets of Scotch bonnets, red and yellow and green, shone like jewels. Heaps of dried cayenne pepper, fragrant and potent, were piled high. Auntie Yeside herself seemed to be carved from some ancient, resilient wood. She was 73, a Yoruba woman from Ogbomosho in Nigeria, who had followed her children to Ghana decades ago. Her skin was a beautiful deep midnight, crisscrossed with the fine lines of a life fully lived. Her silver hair was plaited into a neat crown, and her eyes, though clouded slightly with age, missed nothing. They were eyes that had seen joy and sorrow in equal measure and had chosen kindness as their final verdict. She sat on a low wooden stool, her hands gnarled but nimble, sorting peppers with a practiced grace. There was a warmth that radiated from her, a palpable aura of peace in the middle of the market's chaos. She treated everyone the same. The wealthy woman in lace who bought a whole basket was my daughter. The young boy sent to buy a single pepper for his mother's stew was my son. Her prices were fair, her smile was free, and her dignity was absolute. Nana was drawn to her stall on his first visit and returned every week after. He would buy a generous amount of Scotch bonnets, more than he and Amara needed, just to have a reason to speak with her. He never haggled. He always asked how she was, how her children were. He would listen to her stories of Ogbomosho, of the way the rain smelled different there. In a world that judged him by his profession, Auntie Yeside saw his person. She watched him. She saw how he helped a fellow shopper whose bag of yams had split open, gathering them from the dusty ground without a second thought. She saw how he spoke to the children selling sachets of water, asking their names before buying from them. One day, as she was measuring his peppers, she looked up at him, her gaze direct and searching. "You have the hands of a farmer," she said. It was not an accusation, as it was in Abena's mouth. It was a statement of fact, of honor. Nana simply nodded. "Yes, Mama, I do." "It is good work," she said, adding an extra handful of peppers to his bag. "It is God's work. You feed the people." In that simple exchange, Nana felt more seen and respected than he had in 2 years of family dinners at his wife's home. The market became his sanctuary, and Auntie Yeside, the pepper seller, became his silent confidant. He did not know it then, but this humble woman, with nothing to her name but a stall of peppers and an abundance of grace, was about to become the most important person in his life. The humiliations began as small cuts, paper-thin slices at his dignity that drew no blood but stung nonetheless. They always happened at family gatherings, the arenas where Abena performed her superiority. The first major offense occurred at a cousin's wedding. It was a lavish affair at the Grand Hyatt, a spectacle of wealth and status. Abena had outdone herself, draped in gold lace that shimmered aggressively under the ballroom's chandeliers. Her gil was a magnificent, towering sculpture of fabric that seemed to declare her importance to the heavens. Nana and Amara arrived quietly. Nana wore a simple, impeccably clean, white agbada, the fabric crisp and stark against his dark skin. He felt comfortable. He felt dignified. He had no desire to compete in the silent, expensive war of attire being waged around him. He was there to celebrate a marriage. They found their assigned table already crowded with relatives who offered polite but cool greetings. Abena was holding court, her voice carrying across the table, narrating her latest shopping trip to Dubai. When she saw Nana take his seat, she paused mid-sentence, a theatrical, calculated halt. She surveyed him from head to toe, her lips curling into a smirk. "Amara, my dear sister," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire table and the neighboring tables to hear. "So glad you could make it. And you brought your husband." She said the word husband as if it were a foreign, slightly unpleasant object in her mouth. She leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. "I do hope he washed the farm off his feet before coming to bless this sacred union. We wouldn't want to track mud on the hotel's fine carpets." A wave of laughter rippled through the table. It was not kind laughter. It was sharp, sycophantic, eager to please the woman who held the family's purse strings. Some cousins snickered behind their hands, others laughed openly, their eyes flicking to Nana to gauge his reaction. Amara's face flushed with shame. She looked down at her plate, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She wanted to defend him, to scream at her sister, but the weight of family expectation of Abena's dominance was a physical force that pinned her to her chair. Nana did not react. His expression remained placid, his posture unchanged. He picked up his fork and began to eat his jollof rice, each mouthful a deliberate, silent act of defiance. He would not give her the satisfaction of his anger. He would not let her poison this moment of celebration, but inside, the words landed like stones. He washed the farm off his feet. She was reducing him to dirt, to something unclean that had to be cleansed before entering her civilized world. He could feel the eyes on him, waiting for him to break, to argue, to show his hurt. He showed them nothing. He simply ate his rice. The following Saturday, he went to the market. He felt a weariness deep in his bones. Auntie Yeside saw it in the way he stood, in the slight slump of his powerful shoulders. "The world was heavy this week, my son?" she asked gently as she scooped his peppers into a bag. Nana managed a small smile. "Something like that, Mama." She finished tying the bag and looked up at him, her old eyes full of a profound wisdom. "The soil is more honest than people, my son," she said, her voice a low, comforting rumble. "It gives back exactly what you put in. People, people are not always so fair." She pushed the bag into his hand and added an extra scoop from another basket. "For your trouble." He thanked her, the simple act of kindness, a soothing balm on the fresh wound. He left the market feeling a little lighter, her words echoing in his mind. The soil is more honest than people. It was the truest thing he had ever heard. The next assault came 6 months later, at the family's annual Christmas dinner. The event was held at the sprawling family compound in Accra, a beautiful but aging house that stood as a monument to the patriarch's past success. The air was thick with the smell of roasting goat and the sound of boastful chatter. Everyone was dressed in their finest, eager to display the fruits of their year. One cousin had a new Mercedes parked ostentatiously in the driveway. Another was talking loudly about a government contract he had secured. Abena, of course, was the sun around which all these smaller planets orbited. She wore a red gown that clung to her like a second skin, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. She moved through the room with an air of ownership, dispensing compliments and criticisms with equal authority. Dinner was a long, drawn-out affair. After the main course, as dessert was being served, Abena clinked her glass for attention. "As the year comes to a close," she began, a smug smile on her face. It's a time for us to reflect on our blessings and our accomplishments. Tunde has his new car. David has his big contract. I myself have had a very profitable year. She paused, letting the implication of her financial success hang in the air. Then her eyes found Nana at the far end of the table. And Nana, she said, her tone dripping with mock sincerity, what great harvest do you have to report to the family? What great accomplishments have you brought to our name this year? The table fell silent. All eyes turned to him. It was a deliberate public challenge designed to humiliate. Nana looked down the long table at his sister-in-law. He could have told them about the new irrigation system he'd installed, which had tripled his crop yield. He could have mentioned the preliminary talks he was having with the European distributor. He could have spoken of his plans, the fire in his belly that envisioned a food empire that would span the continent. But he knew she didn't want to hear about his success. She wanted to hear about his failure. She wanted him to be small so she could feel big. So he gave her a simple, honest answer. Just yams and maize, Abena, he said, his voice quiet but clear. It was a good year for yams and maize. Abena threw her head back and laughed. It was not a sound of joy. It was a sharp, cruel bark that sliced through the room. Yams and maize, she shrieked, slapping the table with her manicured hand. Did you all hear that? My sister's husband, the great provider of our family. He brings us yams and maize. The table erupted in laughter once more, following her lead. They laughed at the farmer. They laughed at his simple answer, at his perceived lack of ambition. Amara stared at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her fork, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Nana said nothing. He simply met Abena's mocking gaze, his own eyes steady and unreadable. He let her have her moment. He let them all laugh. He was a farmer. He knew that you could not harvest a crop the day after you planted the seed. It took time. It took patience. And it took enduring the elements. Abena was just another storm he had to weather. The next market day, he found himself opening up to Auntie Yeside. He didn't tell her the details of the humiliation, but he spoke of his dreams. He stood by her stall, the scent of peppers sharp in the air, and he talked about more than just yams and maize. He spoke of drip irrigation and soil science. He talked about greenhouse technology and creating a cooperative for smallholder farmers. He talked about export licenses and building a brand that would be synonymous with quality. He spoke of his vision, not just to farm, but to feed nations. Auntie Yeside listened intently, her head cocked to one side. She did not interrupt. She just sorted her peppers and listened, her occasional nod a powerful encouragement. When he had finished, a passionate energy humming in the air around him, she looked up, her eyes shining with the fierce respect. A man who feeds his family is a father, she said, her voice low and resonant. A man who feeds a nation is a king. She paused, pointing a wrinkled finger at his chest. Do not let anyone tell you that your crown is made of dirt. It is made of life itself. Her words were a coronation. In the middle of the noisy market, a 73-year-old pepper seller had just placed an invisible crown on his head. Nana felt his spirit soar. He was not just a farmer. He was a king in waiting. The final, most brutal humiliation came a year later. The family patriarch, Amara and Abena's father, had fallen ill. His once thriving business was now faltering, a ship taking on water. A family meeting was called at the compound to discuss the grim state of their finances. The atmosphere was tense. Abena, who had taken over the company's management, was defensive and stressed. Her expensive solutions and flashy rebranding efforts had failed. The company was bleeding money. They sat in the formal living room, financial statements spread across the coffee table like a funeral shroud. Uncle after uncle offered foolish suggestions, while cousins argued over who was to blame. Nana listened silently for over an hour. He knew their business was tied to agricultural commodities, an area he understood better than anyone in the room. He saw the flaws in their supply chain, the inefficiencies in their storage. Finally, when there was a lull in the bickering, he spoke. If I may, he said respectfully, the problem is not in the selling, it is in the sourcing. Your spoilage rates are too high. If you were to invest in climate-controlled warehousing near the farms, he never got to finish. Abena, who had been simmering with rage and frustration, exploded. Her face, usually a mask of cool composure, was twisted with fury. Be quiet, she snarled, her voice venomous. What would you possibly know about business? You are just a farmer. She stood up, her whole body trembling with the rage that had been building for years. She pointed a finger at him, the diamond on her ring flashing like a weapon. My sister married dirt, and now you bring the smell of it into our family's most serious affairs. How dare you speak? Go back to your pigs and your mud where you belong. A shocked silence fell over the room. This was different. This wasn't a casual jibe at a wedding. This was a primal scream of contempt. The cruelty of it was so raw, so absolute, that even the most sycophantic family members looked down at their feet, suddenly uncomfortable. My sister married dirt. The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Amara let out a small, wounded cry and fled the room, her sobs echoing in the hallway. Nana felt the words land like a physical blow. It was the culmination of every small cut, every mocking laugh, every dismissive gesture. He had been reduced to nothing. He was dirt. He was the smell of mud. He was less than human in her eyes. He slowly rose to his feet. He looked at Abena, whose chest was heaving, her eyes blazing with a terrible, self-righteous fire. He looked around at the silent, complicit family. He did not say a word. There was nothing left to say. He turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and into the hot Accra sun. The cruelest words he had ever heard branding themselves onto his soul. The next Saturday, Nana drove to the market on autopilot. His spirit felt crushed, grounded into the very dirt Abena had accused him of being. He felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness that was deeper than any physical solitude. He was a successful man by his own metrics, a good husband, a man with a grand vision. But in the eyes of the family he had married into, he was nothing. The weight of it was crushing. He walked through the bustling market, the vibrant colors and sounds muted and distant, as if he were underwater. He arrived at Auntie Yeside's stall and stood there, unable to meet her gaze. He felt a shame he couldn't name. Peppers? My son? She asked, her voice as gentle as always. He nodded, still looking at the ground. He mumbled his order. She measured them out, her movements slow and deliberate. He paid her, their hands brushing for a moment. He could feel the warmth of her skin, a small point of life in his cold, desolate world. He took the bag and turned to leave, wanting to retreat back into the anonymity of his car, to hide with his hurt. Nana, her voice stopped him. It was soft, but it carried an undeniable authority. He turned back slowly. Auntie Yeside was holding a covered bowl. It was a simple earthenware bowl, warm to the touch. The smell that wafted from it was a divine aroma of spinach, smoked fish, and locust beans, the unmistakable scent of afo riro. Beside it was a neatly wrapped portion of steaming abe. My son, she said, her voice thick with a maternal tenderness that cracked his fragile composure. You cannot build a farm on an empty stomach. Take. She pushed the warm bowl into his hands. His hands, the hands Abena had mocked, the hands that could coax life from the soil, trembled as they accepted the offering. He looked down at the bowl, then up at her face. Her eyes were filled with a deep, knowing compassion. She saw his pain. She didn't need to know the words that had been said. She could read the story in his soul. Mama, I can't, he stammered, his throat tight. I must pay you. He reached for his wallet, but she shook her head firmly, her expression unwavering. A mother does not sell food to her son, she said. The words were simple, but they landed with the force of a revelation. A mother, her son. In one sentence, she had erased Abena's poison. She had claimed him, dignified him, loved him. He looked at her small stall, at the modest display of peppers. He knew this was not food from some large, ever-full pot in the back. This was her own meal. This was the food she was going to take home to her own family or eat for her own lunch. The sacrifice was immense, offered without a moment's hesitation. It was a gift not of surplus, but of substance. It cost her something. His eyes, which had remained dry through all of Abena's taunts, began to burn. A hot, thick tear escaped and traced a path through the dust on his cheek. He tried to speak, but no words would come. He was overwhelmed by the sheer, uncalculated grace of the act. He had been starving, not for food, but for this, for a single gesture of unconditional kindness. He stood there for a long time, clutching the warm bowl as if it were a lifeline. The noises of the market faded away. There was only him and this old woman and the sacred offering that passed between them. She reached out and patted his arm. "Eat, my son," she said softly. "The pepper is sweet today. It will give you strength." That day, Nana did not go straight home. He drove to a quiet spot by the ocean and sat in his car. He unwrapped the food. The steam rose, carrying the scent of home, of care, of love. He took the first bite of Eba, dipping it into the rich, savory stew. The taste was explosive. It was more than just food. It was respect. It was validation. It was strength. Each bite was an act of healing, pushing out the bitterness of Abena's words and replacing it with the warmth of Auntie Yeside's kindness. He ate slowly, savoring every mouthful, and with each bite, he felt his broken spirit begin to mend. This became their new ritual. Every Saturday, after he bought his peppers, Auntie Yeside would have a bowl of food for him. Sometimes it was Efo Riro. Other times it was a hearty groundnut soup or a fragrant bowl of jollof rice she had made for her own family. She never accepted a seti for it. It was always a gift. And with the food, she would give him a proverb. "The river that forgets its source will dry up," she told him one week, reminding him to stay true to his roots. "A patient dog eats the fattest bone," she said another, counseling him to endure. "The same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay," she offered, teaching him that hardship could either destroy him or make him stronger. He was the clay. Auntie Yeside's weekly gift of food and wisdom was the fire that hardened him. He stopped caring about Abena's opinion. He stopped seeking the family's approval. Their laughter, their scorn, it all became distant noise, like the buzz of harmless insects. He had been nourished by a grace so profound that it made their judgment irrelevant. He poured all his energy, all his focus, all his newfound strength into his work. He took Auntie Yeside's proverbs and turned them into a business plan. He remembered his source, investing in the farmers in his home region. He was patient, making smart, long-term investments instead of chasing quick profits. He allowed the hardships, the bad weather, the market fluctuations, the bureaucratic hurdles to harden him, to make him smarter, more resilient. The next 10 years were a quiet explosion of growth. His small farm, Nana Farms, grew into Nana Global Foods. His yams and maize were now the least of his portfolio. He built state-of-the-art processing plants. His fleet of climate-controlled trucks became a common sight on the highways. He signed distribution deals not just in Europe, but in Asia and America. He became a titan of agribusiness, a quiet mogul whose name was spoken with reverence in boardrooms from Lagos to London. He never moved to a flashy mansion. He and Amara built a beautiful, comfortable home, but it was surrounded by farmland, not high walls. He still drove his own pickup truck, and every Saturday he was in Accra. He still went to Makola Market to buy peppers from Auntie Yeside and receive his weekly meal. While Nana's star ascended, Abena's began to fall. Her arrogance made for poor business practice. She alienated partners and mismanaged funds, chasing vanity projects while the core of the family business rotted from within. She borrowed heavily, using the family compound as collateral, always believing her status and cleverness would save her. But the market, like the soil, is honest. It does not reward pride, it rewards value. And Abena was creating none. The patriarch passed away. The debts came due. The bank, which had no sentiment, began foreclosure proceedings on the family home. The fall was as swift as it was brutal. The woman who had laughed at a farmer for his yams and maize now found herself with nothing, which brought them all to that fateful day in the drawing room, the air thick with the smell of failure. Abena, stripped of her power, was trying to rally a family she had long dominated but never truly led. She was met with empty pockets, and averted eyes. The desperation was palpable. And then Nana walked in, holding the deed. His speech was not long, but every word was weighed with the gravity of a decade of silence. He stood in the center of the room, a pillar of calm in their storm of panic. "I want to thank you," he began, his voice even and low, capturing everyone's attention. "All of you, but especially you, Abena. You have been my greatest teacher." A confused murmur went through the room. Abena stared at him, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You taught me that a man's worth is not measured by the car he drives or the suit he wears. I learned that lesson at a cousin's wedding right here in this city. I was told to wash the farm from my feet before entering. I was treated like I was an unclean." He paused, letting the memory surface in the minds of those who had been there, who had laughed. Shame began to dawn on their faces. "You taught me that ambition is only respectable when it is polished and loud. I learned that at a Christmas dinner in this very house. I was mocked for my harvest of yams and maize. My dreams were small and dirty and a source of great amusement." His gaze was fixed on Abena, who had gone pale. "But the most important lesson," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense, came from a meeting just like this one. "In this very room, I was told that my wife had married dirt. I was told I brought the smell of mud into this family's affairs. I was told to go back to my pigs." He recited the words without anger, stating them as facts. But the impact was devastating. He had held onto that precise phrasing for 10 years. Hearing it repeated in the cold, quiet light of their ruin was a judgment more absolute than any court could deliver. Abena sank into a nearby chair, her body seeming to shrink, to collapse under the weight of her own cruelty. Nana's tone then softened. He had made his point. Now came the purpose. "On my weakest day, when those words had broken my spirit, I was saved, not by a banker or a businessman, but by an old woman selling peppers in Macola Market, a woman who had nothing but who gave me everything." He turned toward the door and gestured for someone to enter. Auntie Yeside walked in, leaning lightly on Amara's arm. She was dressed in a simple but beautiful wax print cloth, her silver hair plaited neatly, her expression serene. She looked around the opulent room with calm, curious eyes. "This," Nana announced, his voice ringing with love and pride, "is Mama Yeside. She fed me when I was hungry. But more than that, she fed my spirit when it was starving. She gave me dignity from her own pot when this family fed me only scorn. She is the true wealth. She is the foundation upon which everything I have built stands." He turned back to the stunned family, and with a slow, deliberate movement, he unrolled the document in his hand. It was the title deed to the family compound. His name was listed as the sole owner. "You always said I was not fit to stand in this house," he said, his voice quiet again, bringing the moment full circle. "Today, I own it." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence filled with a decade of unspoken truths, of casual cruelties now seen in their full ugliness. It was the silence of a world turned upside down. Abena did not speak. She could not. She sat frozen in her chair, a statue of broken pride. The woman who always had the last word, the sharpest retort, had been rendered utterly speechless. Her cruelty, which had been her power, was now her public shame. The family she had ruled through fear and finance now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. She had led them to ruin, while the man she had mocked had become their savior. It was a reversal of fortune so total, so poetic, that it felt like an act of God. Nana watched her for a moment, his expression not of triumph, but of a deep, quiet sadness. He had not done this for revenge. He had done this for justice, for the rebalancing of a moral scale that had been tilted for far too long. He rolled the deed back up and walked over to his wife, Amara. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions: shock, pride, and a profound bone-deep love for the man she had chosen. He placed the document in her hands. "This house belongs to this family," he said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "The debt is cleared. It is a gift." Another wave of gas went through the room. They had been prepared for eviction, for punishment. They were not prepared for grace. I have only one condition, Nana continued, his eyes sweeping across the room before landing on Auntie Yeside, who stood with quiet dignity by the door. My condition is that Mama Yeside, from this day forward, will always have a seat at the head of the table. Her wisdom will be sought, and her comfort will be our family's highest priority. This house was saved by her kindness. It will be governed by her spirit. He then walked to Auntie Yeside, bowed his head slightly in a gesture of deep traditional respect, and said, Mama, welcome home. 6 months passed. The seasons changed. The story of that day became a legend within the family, a cautionary tale whispered to the younger generation. Nana's gift had not just saved their home, it had humbled them, reshaped them. The family gatherings were different now. The boasting was gone, replaced by a quieter, more genuine connection. And at the head of the long dining table, in the seat of honor, Auntie Yeside always sat, her presence a constant, gentle reminder of what truly mattered. Abena had disappeared from the family's social life. She sold her mansion in Buckhead to pay off personal debts and moved into a small, modest apartment. The Chanel bags and Tom Ford perfumes were gone, replaced by a quiet anonymity. She was stripped of the armor of wealth she had worn for so long, and for the first time in her life, she was just a woman, alone with her regrets. One Saturday morning, she found herself walking through the chaos of Makola Market. She didn't know why she had come. It was as if some force beyond her understanding had guided her there. She moved through the crowds, her steps uncertain, until she saw it. The small, humble stall overflowing with peppers. Auntie Yeside was there, sitting on her low wooden stool, sorting her wares. She looked exactly the same. The world had changed, but she had not. Abena stood at the edge of the stall for a long time, unable to speak, unable to move. She, who had commanded boardrooms and silenced family members with a single glance, was now paralyzed by the presence of a humble pepper seller. Finally, Auntie Yeside looked up. Her eyes, which had seen Nana's pain so clearly, now saw Abena's. There was no triumph in her gaze, no hint of, I told you so. There was only a calm, deep-seated compassion. She smiled a small, gentle smile. Without a word, she scooped a handful of beautiful red Scotch bonnets into a bag. She stood up, her old bones creaking slightly, and walked around the stall to where Abena stood frozen. She pressed the bag of peppers into Abena's trembling hand. For your stew, my daughter, she said softly. The simple act of kindness, the gentle word, daughter, did what years of privilege and power could not. It broke through Abena's pride. A choked sob escaped her lips, then another. Soon, her body was racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs, the tears of a lifetime of regret pouring down her face. She cried for her cruelty, for her blindness, for the love she had rejected and the goodness she had failed to see. Auntie Yeside did not recoil. She simply reached out and placed a warm, steady hand on Abena's shoulder, letting her weep. Shh, now, she murmured, her voice like a soft rain. The rain has fallen, my daughter. The hard ground has been broken. Now is the time for planting. The closing image of this story is not one of wealth or power, but of love. It is a year after the great revelation. The family compound is alive with the sounds of joy. It is Nana and Amara's 20th wedding anniversary, and a great celebration is underway. The garden is filled with music and laughter. Nana, in a magnificent kente cloth, moves through the crowd, a man at peace, a king in his own garden. But the heart of the celebration is not in the garden, it is in the kitchen. The large, airy kitchen has been renovated, filled with modern appliances, but at its center is a traditional coal pot, glowing with warmth, and standing before it, stirring a massive, fragrant pot of Ifo Riro, is Auntie Yeside. She is not a guest. She is the queen of this domain. Her face, illuminated by the warm kitchen light, is radiant with joy. Nana's children, whom she calls her grandchildren, surround her, trying to sneak a piece of fried plantain. She laughs, a full, rich sound that is the house's true music, and playfully shoos them away. She is at the head. not just of the table, but of the home's very soul, nourishing the family with the same love she once offered in a simple earthenware bowl. Every tale has a lesson, and our channel never forgets. The story of Nana reminds us of a timeless truth, one whispered by the Yoruba elders for generations. It is a truth as simple and as powerful as a seed taking root in the earth. Rain falls on the farm, not on the man who laughs at the farmer. Subscribe for more stories that honor the heart.